Hello, everybody. Good to see you again. I am adjusting the light. Well, I am back. I apologize for being gone. Um, I shared in an earlier video in the middle of the week about what happened. So I won't do that again. I'll just jump in with what we're talking about. So we did, I did a share of how to use the 12 steps from Alcoholics Anonymous to deal with the coronavirus, the pandemic, the politics, the civil unrest, the whole problems in the world. And I've been wanting to do this for a while because I think whether a person's an addict or an alcoholic or some kind of person who struggles with compulsion, that there's value to use these principles. And I'll be short through 1 through 3. You know, step 1 is really admitting powerless over this. So many of us try to be powerful over things we just can't be powerful over. It's like trying to control the rotation of the earth. It just doesn't work. I'm sorry, this light really bothers me. I'm going to do that. The reason is it makes it seem like I have okay, well, that was an easy fix. For weeks, I keep thinking that I'm going to have some kind of halo experience. So I need to be humble here. So we try to control all the things we cannot change and the things we could change, which is looking at our own self, we just don't do. So this pandemic, or we'll call it the events in the world, is an opportunity for me to look at myself and to look at how am I creating my own pain and suffering through this. It's not it's me. And I feel hypocritical sharing some of this, but a true hypocrite is someone who puts on a mask. And my goal isn't to put on a mask. My goal is to put myself in the same boat as everybody else, to be a fellow recovering person. So step 2 is to believe that there is a power, who I understand is God, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But there are people that have more of a concept of God that is not necessarily that. I do like what someone who was pretty wise said, that God himself is anonymous in this program, meaning he doesn't require you to understand fully who he is before he starts to help anybody who will call out for help. So just to turn from my trying to fix everything, or politics is going to save me, we just get the right politician, or the right medicine, that's going to save us. 12 steps says no, there's no human power that can relieve us our obsession. So we go to God. We can't self-willpower ourselves to a better state. In fact, I was sharing with someone, this pretty bold statement, but it's easy to, I think, to talk about God these days because, and I mean no disrespect towards what I'm going to say, the people that do these things, but it's like, if medicine was going to save us, why? Yeah, hello. Why is this as good as it gets? And when medicine is at its best, it's humble. There's this attitude that we know these things, but there's so much we don't know, and so they don't make these mandates. Politics, same thing. When they come across as though we're going to save you, just do things our way, it's like, well, we shall see. And even thinking that some government, whether it's local or distant, is going to make my life better or worse. And that's hard for me to say because I do believe in a different government than another kind of government. But the thing is, I could be miserable under the government I have, or I could be actually very blessed under a bad government, in my opinion. So it really pulls me back to myself in a good way and ask, what do I need to be healthy? And what I found is what we're doing is applying the 12 steps of AA to the world, the problems of the world at large. Third step is to turn my will over to the care of God. So I'm going to just turn over all that I want to have happen, my plans. We talked about the director running the whole show in our last video. But tonight, I'd like to get into the defects of character. Why would we look at defects of character? Well, the AA book, here I'll do a little, suggests that these are the things that block us from God's power. And there's four major things. We'll say resentment. So anytime I am holding on to a resentment, that blocks God's power. 2, dishonesty. 3, anxiety. And 4, selfishness. And I'll try to stay in sync here, and I'll describe each one in more detail. So resentments make our lives miserable. Resent means to re-feel. Sentir in the Latin languages, French, Spanish, would mean to feel. Resent means to re-feel. So think sentimental sentiment. So when something bad happened to me, or someone did something bad to me, or I did something bad to myself, it's one thing to have hurt myself by experiencing that, or someone hurt me. The last 100 times that I keep repeating it over and over and over and over in my mind, I'm just hurting myself. It's almost like an addiction in and of itself, that it's never good enough. It's never satisfying, but it makes you want to have more, to get even, to get mad. It's fantasy oriented in the sense that I'm fantasizing about what they did. What it does is it pulls me out of the here and the now to go back into the future, to go back into the past. It makes people into objects when we resent people. It's like they don't have a life story. There is no empathy for where they're coming from. It's just about how they've harmed me. How does this relate to world current events? Well, easy. I'm sure there's a lot of people with a lot of resentments about how the coronavirus happened. We could be resentful towards the countries that did not protect us from it, were not honest. Maybe it's one country. We could be mad at the governors or the politicians or the health officials or the media. I mean, and we don't need to just even watch it once. We could watch it over and over and over again. And last time we met, I suggested that, it's one thing for something bad to happen, and maybe people didn't handle it well. But it's another to now, let's argue about what he or she didn't do back then and point out all the mistakes they made, as if they're supposed to be perfect individuals. Like, the problem is, and this is a judgment, but I think if it shows you how, if they had a 12-step program, it says in the AA book, they would realize they know only a little. They would not have said things so imperative like we know this and that and all that. No, if and I wrote this in a meditation last night. If someone could say, "I'm sorry, I made a mistake," so simple. If, say, like medical people could say, "Look, we're sorry, we made a mistake. We told you that masks weren't effective, and now maybe they are, or maybe they aren't." Maybe, and this brings us to honesty, maybe they should have been honest with people when they said, the masks are not effective, but actually we need them for healthcare people. If they're so not effective, then why are we using them for healthcare people? If masks are so not effective, then why are surgeons wearing them, when dealing with people that have, let's open up your gut and we do surgery, let's wear a mask. It's so that the droplets don't get into your gut. So it's really kind of weird, this whole mask thing. And then I could be resentful towards all the people and the masks, See, so resentment is addictive, and what it does is it destroys your peace. It doesn't bring joy. It makes me higher than the people I'm being resentful towards. Yeah, I mean, and I'm not trying to start a political thing, but just to point out, like Dr. Fauci at the beginning of this did say, it's okay to take a cruise. That was bad advice, especially for the people stuck on cruise ships. So, had we had a little bit more humility, it might have been wiser for us to say, we don't know what this pandemic, and by the way, it's easy for me to get up here and talk about what people should or could have done. So, I'm not there to criticize so much as to point out that 12-step principles really do help. Like a 12-step principle of humility. We don't know everything. We don't want to have black and white thinking. We don't want to be fear driven, but we don't want to be pride driven. I mean, these are all telltale signs of alcoholism. We don't want to have denial. There's another whole aspect that happened with this. You have people that won't believe this exists. And it's just like, I don't believe I have an alcohol problem. And there's defensiveness. So then people can't listen to each other. They can't even discuss the problem. So let's move to racism or defunding the police or trying to have reform with the police. Clearly, there's not good dialogue going back. If one goes to a 12-step group, any of them, they have this don't crosstalk rule. You would think, well, how does anything ever get solved? It's been going 80 years. It's pretty powerful. What you do in a meeting is I might say, hi, Eric. I'm Eric. I'm a recovering alcoholic. Hi, Eric. Then I would share. During that share, no one interrupts. I might get 3 minutes to 5 minutes. In fact, they hold up a little thing sometimes to help me know when I'm almost done. In fact, this would have helped the debate, actually. Just to have a little light that shows you have 1 minute left to share. And there would be no crosstalk. Now, I know a debate is the opposite because you're supposed to crosstalk afterwards, but back to the meeting. In the meeting, after I've shared, say like I say some things, no one would comment on any of that. They would only share what their week was like, how they're trying to apply the steps. There does seem to be a thing that happens where people get on kind of a topic, say like resentment. So then they all talk about resentments and how they're trying to apply the opposite principle of being having gratitude. Does it create more safety in meetings? It does. Do we feel like we can share some of our deeper, darker secrets there? We can. Do we feel closer to the people? It's not everybody equal, but we feel pretty safe in meetings. It's really kind of an interesting experience just to be able to talk, to share, to be mindful of the time. This works in families, that people take this skill to their families, and maybe it's gentle and mild. A gentle, mild approach would be just to start listening to family members, just listen and try not to offer feedback or criticism, obviously, or any kind of advice, but just listen. And people often feel heard and their problems are solved. Well, they're solved through the 12 steps. What if we had such a listening ear with people who have a different political persuasion, or a different life experience, or a different opinion on how to solve racism, or the experience of racism, or what the police have done good in their life, or what the police have not done good in their life? And the fascinating thing with this is that why police and not any other profession? There have probably been crooked politicians, so should we get rid of all of them? And crooked doctors, should we get rid of all of them? Crooked counselors, get rid of all of them? I mean, where will it stop? And if we apply the defect to character, are we trying to be perfectionistic? Maybe our standards are way too high for people, and we expect so much out of people, and then it's become popular to just criticize people. So, so that's resentment, and we could go on and on and on. We won't, but you get the gist of it. I will say this: is I've heard it said that, and this is just fake coffee here. By the way, it's called Dandy Blend. I love Dandy Blend. It's one of the best. I don't have a bag, but if you're looking for a coffee alternative that's gluten free, it's pretty cool stuff. And I'm a counselor, so I've offered it to people. They go, "Oh yeah, yeah, okay, I'll try it." After they try, they go, "Thank you for the Dandy Blend," and they buy it, order it themselves. So it has dandelion root. You wouldn't taste it. In fact, I like it. Maybe I'm a recovering addict. That's why I like it so much. But I may have 2 cups a day. But I've wondered, am I getting too much, detoxification with dandelion root? But anyway, resentment is a poison I drink in hopes that you will die. All it's doing is poisoning me. Dishonesty. Now, most of us go, well, I'm not a liar. But honesty and the truth is so much more beyond us. Like, say, like I can get from here to Seattle in 20 minutes. Well, that may not be honest. It may be more honest to say I could be there in 40 minutes or an hour. So this inflated sense of self often is not an honest appraisal of things. Me only taking one side of the media, picking the media that gives me the narrative I want, that may not be balanced. It's the same thing as an addict not really thinking they're an alcoholic at all, because they only look at how the glass is half empty. They don't look at how it's half full. They don't look at all the problems that the drinking has caused. So if we just cherry pick reality and we just pick the narrative of what we want, we're not going to be as high as functioning as if we have an open mind to see reality as it is. But by the way, why do we use any addiction? For comfort. We want the precious. Oh yeah, Dandy Blend. Yeah. I just got a feedback. Here, I'm going to read so I can Curvin. I thought that was. Yeah, a shout out to you there. It's good actually cold. It's really just powder and you just mix it with water. It's actually good in a smoothie. It's something else. I a little bit off topic, but you poor people. I think what makes it interestingly rich is beetroot powder. It's not sweet, but that mixture with chicory or some kind of roasted barley, and I've called them to say, is this gluten-free? It is. So they got a good combination there. And it's pretty inexpensive. It's at first it's maybe $27 for a bag. You wonder, is this really? But then when you start doing the math in little cups, coffee, or well, cups, you just start to. So honesty. And I'm finding that every day I try to ask God, please reveal more of myself to myself. reveal more of reality the way it is. In fact, this would segue into a nice prayer called the set aside prayer. In fact, I'll put it here. You can look it up online. But the set aside prayer goes like this: God, help me set aside everything I think I know about you. Help me set aside everything I think I know about myself. Help me set aside everything I think I know about this disease, in this case, everything I think I know about what's going on in the world, the racism, the, the politics, the coronavirus. Help me set aside everything I think I know about that. And help me set aside everything I think I know about the solution. Grant that I may see you as you really are, myself as I really am, that's strengths and weaknesses, the world and whatever's going on it, the way it really is, and grant that I may know the true solution. Amen. It's a really good prayer because it's so safe. People that hold on to their understanding of God, and it's like, well, nope, I know how I know. Okay. The thing is, we're putting God in a box there. And if God's real, which I believe he is, he's strong enough to reveal himself to me. If I have an honest attitude to say, please reveal more of who you are. And for some of us who've been really thinking God's mad at me or not loving enough, he reveals more of his love. I mean, it's pretty powerful experience. Not to get preachy, but in the Bible, he's called the God of all comfort. And so since this is the Tuesday night comfort hour, it's the place to go. I can see myself more of who I really am. And I think the coronavirus originally and other trials along the way with shutdowns, and I see that I'm not as kind, and I'm not trying to put myself down, but I'm not as kind as I thought I was. I'm not as virtuous as I thought I was. Was I thinking of how to protect me and my family, or was I just trying to follow what I think that God wants me to do? And then everything else would work out. It's not that I didn't have any kindness and compassion. And I mean, I obviously, by God's grace, started this Tuesday night comfort hour. And in fact, it helped me not think about my problems. Being a therapist, you end up seeing people with challenges all the time. So there is a sense that you could be brought down by it, but you could also be grateful. But then I feel kind of a little bit guilty being grateful that I'm not struggling like other people, and try not to think so much, but just to do. I think the coronavirus experience, the shutdown, did cause people to go inward and look at themselves more, and to see their personalities and possibly addictions more clear. And so a lot of people, it surprised me, were calling me up wanting to go off of alcohol, wanting to go off of shopping addiction, wanting to go off of marijuana, realized they had an anger problem. When we're busy and constantly moving about, we don't have time to see ourselves. Ancient Christianity had this phrase, and it's really pretty smart, that in a pool of water that's still and calm, you can see yourself, you can see your reflection. But if that water is always moving about and rushing here and there and everywhere, you can't be still enough to see yourself. So there's a certain practice that 12 steppers do where they practice a morning and evening prayer. This would be step 11. We'll get to that when we get to that. So dishonesty. So we're looking at how ways we're dishonest with ourselves. The next one would be anxiety, fear. So, well, that's easy. There's not much to say about that. I think a lot of us have been afraid. Um, and there's just different fears that people have. Some people are afraid of the virus to the point where they won't leave their home. Every grocery comes from a delivery truck. They may leave home to just go to the doctor. Others who may, and some of those have autoimmune disorders, they have cancer, they already have something they're trying to fight, and this just scares them. And we'll talk about how the steps kind of approach this. You have other people afraid of losing liberty and freedom, and see any mask wearing as the beginning of the loss of a free society. And just to talk about the things that have happened in the world, it feels like not science fiction, but really out there. And the really are there. I mean, some of this isn't made up. The media has made a lot of money. Not, I'm trying to judge them, but I don't know if their sole motive is that, but they're going to make a lot of money. I mean, people are more attracted to it to hear what the latest fearful thing that we can be frightened of, etc. We can be frightened for our children, what's going to happen with school, what are the long-term effects of shutdowns, how are people going to really, like a serious thing is gyms. Like I think gyms, even though there's a risk, like churches should be essential, but keeping the ability to work out, and just anybody who's there is trying to be healthy anyway. And they could do screening at the door. They could do a lot of things, but just to willy nilly shut them down to make their health safe doesn't make sense to me. It's just the exact opposite. That's just my opinion. Could they be breeding ground? They could. And could it have been? I mean, in past gym experiences, people use these wipes. In fact, um, and I was always pretty good. I mean, I just wipe after I've used, and I realized it was just a higher chance of getting infection. But yeah, gee, we have to take healthy risks. The AA people say that all fear, well, I'll just jump. And then the last one is selfishness. Selfishness is this inflated sense of self. It's not just always about, I want, I'll address that. Yeah, that is very important. Um, I love being distracted in this way. It makes much more for a dialogue. But selfishness is this inflated sense of self that I'm going to fight my addiction by myself, which is kind of the opposite of the 12 steps. I'm going to solve and keep my family safe by myself. I'm going to look the best news, the best studies, the best thing, and I'm just going to do this all in my own strength. But selfishness goes another direction. It's like I'm too bad of a person. Like I can't do everything right. I can't do anything right. And so what happens is it's an obsession with self. Obsession with self or selfishness, and even just downright selfish, like I want all the jelly beans to myself, is blocking God's grace. Fear, which is an inflated sense of self, trying to say, I'm afraid I'm not going to get what I want in the future. Anger is, I'm afraid I'm not going to get what I want now. And resentment is, I'm mad that I didn't get what I wanted. So when I die to self, I give up what I want and say, God, please come and live in me. Then I have all the power I need. Yeah, the masks are such an interesting thing. Kervin shares that I think he put it out here so I can read it. I'm so geared towards confidentiality. My wife is hearing impaired. She communicates via lip reading. Masks have made a shopping trip very interesting. Yeah, I've worked with hearing impaired people. They're quite incredible. I want to be respectful, but I wonder, you know, this is a good experience because that's one thing that I did not take into account. The mask for me, and I said this just an hour ago, I feel like most of my clients need to be able to take it off because I'm afraid that I'm not going to communicate well when you don't know whether I'm smiling. And a lot of my challenging people, and sometimes I have to challenge strongly, I may be smiling in a way that shows care and concern. I can only imagine that if you rely upon lip reading, that how is that going? And yeah, very dependent. There is a type of mask. It's called Clue. I think they're too expensive. Boy, I'm too opinionated, but Clue masks that are from Italy, about $67, or $60 or $70. And I was going to get one, but I thought, well, I'm just going to wait. It's supposed to be ventilated. And of course, this doesn't help your wife because everybody in the world would need to wear it. But I think that's where we just need to take healthy risks. So the fourth step says we had to begin to look at these defects of character, and the best way to do it is to write them on paper. So you get a pen, get a pencil. In fact, I want to make an impression here with this. So you want something to write it on. You just want to just write down the simple list. And this can be pretty freeing. So I'm just going to make up, I'm somewhat past this, but at the beginning, it's funny because I didn't want to admit I'm fearful of the virus, but if I had any fear of the virus, I should just put virus. And because good Christian people aren't supposed to have fears. They're only supposed to fear God. And okay, but if that's not reality for me, I just need to write it down. I'm mad at the governor, so I put GOV. It doesn't have to be long. Yeah, this will be good. I'm mad at friends, even though I love my friends. And I'm really not mad, but I think it was an unconscious radiating, like, really, you really believe that? Or you're not going to believe this? You're not going to believe like me? You see where this is going? And then I would then have a thought, well, this seems divisive. Why can't you just listen to my view? And when I then start to spout out my view. And we'll just take those three. So the virus, the 12 steps, and I'm going to read because it's pretty eloquent what they say. Alcoholics Anonymous. We said last time it's really good to try to get the book that looks just like this. There are copies, but the page numbers don't line up. It's because it became public domain. You can get them at half-price books locally or any kind of used bookstore. Online, it would probably cost about $14. But this is what we do with fear. It says, notice the word fear. This is page 67. And it says, this short word somehow touches about every aspect of our lives. It was an evil and corroding thread. The fabric of our existence was shot through with it. It set in motion trains of circumstances which brought us misfortune we felt we didn't deserve, but did not we ourselves set the ball rolling. So what's interesting is I thought we're talking about fear, but it goes down this path. That's like, okay, so you're saying that my fear is corroding my life. Yep, I get that. It's evil and corroding thread, the fabric of our existence. Yep, I get that. It set in motion trains of circumstances which brought us misfortune we felt we didn't deserve. How does that work? The problem is when I'm fear based, I'm really not trusting in God at this point. And the whole principle of the 12 steps is to connect with God as a higher power. If I hold on to this higher power, connect with God, I'll have peace. Now it's not perfect all the time, but at least it's there. And it's like the world is a hurricane swirling around me. So if I either have the choice to trust in my own abilities, my own brain power, my own thoughts, my own best strength, or I can let go all of that and hold on to God. And so then it's suggesting that because I have not held on to God and I'm operating in fear, it could set in motion trains of circumstances. So, how this might happen? Well, on a practical note, I might be so stressed that I'm stressing people out around me. We might get into arguments. I might not go do something like, say, like I'm so fear oriented that I'm, and I mean this so politely because in this day and age we feel like we can walk this fence, but let's just be bold here. Um, I may be so fear oriented that I'm very anti masking. So then I'm not going to wear a mask at a wedding, which is going to then make people all frightened of me or start to judge me, saying, oh, he doesn't even care about anybody other than himself. He's going around spreading the coronavirus. I could be fearful of the coronavirus another direction where I'm kind of lecturing people, why don't you wear masks? I could, okay, going a totally different direction by being fear based. I could take my money all out of the stock market, which I don't have any money in the stock market. But see how fear can cause us to do actions that are really not wise. Yeah, yeah. Oh boy, my mind goes a couple of different directions. And this happens in health. And this is a really good um, yeah, okay, Jack, thank you for that. Jack shares, Eric, feel free to answer my question at any point or convenience for you. How do you nurture those family relationships from a distance? We'll try to weave that in tonight. Um, when I am fear based, I'll say this after prayer and meditation and just life, I've found that I'm much more, my actions are often much more fear based. Just ask my son when we're driving together. I might give unwanted advice. Am I surrendered and letting go? No. Will my telling him how to drive keep us absolutely safe? Absolutely not. Oh, so let's with healthcare. This is where I was going to go. And there was a good TED speaker on this TED talk. He said that a lot of our orientation when interacting with doctors and doing a certain treatment can be very fear based. And this happens a lot with cancers. People are scared to death. And the doctor says, you better get this surgery, you better get this chemo, you better get this radiation. And are we wise enough to set aside the fear and even just feel the fear, process it, connect with God, steady ourselves, and then just look at the research? Because I do see that people may get a lot of things that really don't necessarily help them, but they help them feel better like they were doing the right thing. But like for instance, people with the toilet paper, like why go run and buy a lot of toilet paper? And some analysts have said, well, it gave people something that they could focus on, that they could do. Does it have any correlation to making their life better? No, but there was this fear that we were going to run out. So, um, in relationships with loved ones, fear can drive us. That fear of abandonment can make us clingy, which then actually sets in train emotion, makes us more rough to be around because we're so clingy. And I've worked with people with that. And they're very lonely. And the more they're fearful that they're not good enough, no one will love them, the worse it gets. I don't want to get too personal, not so much for me, but there's other family members involved. But I'll say this is that my mother's elderly, and I work in tandem with my brother and sister. And we're trying to decide, is it best for her to live at home or to live in what we would consider an adult family home? If we're just going based on our own brain power, we'll drive ourselves crazy. Fear has been trying to afflict us in that we're afraid to have conversations because we're afraid of the outcome, afraid of the feelings. But I have to constantly get rid of myself. And this is the solution here. It says that, well, I'll read more of the prompt. Sometimes we think fear should be classed with stealing. It seems to cause more problems. And I'll show you how I interact with the AA book here. So hopefully that comes there. So we reviewed our fears thoroughly. We put them on paper, even though we had no resentment in connection with them. We asked ourselves why we had them. So it sounds funny, but it actually is good to just write out the fear. And I believe in expressive writing, get that all out. In this case, just write down maybe 1 or 2 words. It works better. I'm afraid of the virus. Or what else was I afraid of? Being locked down, or we're losing our American freedoms. Okay, that's a good one. Oh, yeah. So this is a good example. I'll tell myself. So, being fearful of losing our American freedoms, there were family members I was chatting with at another family member's birthday party. And it turned into a discussion and probably an argument about what's going on in America. Was I driven by selfishness? Yeah, I had this inflated sense of self that I'm right, that I need to let them know what my thoughts are and to have a counter argument. Was it driven by fear? Yes, that may actually seem like the better motive, that I'm afraid for if they're thinking that way, that they need to see more of the light. Is it dishonest? Well, I would feel that my view was more honest than their view, and my job was to help them see more honest. And resentment? No, I wasn't really resentful, but that's what a 12-stepper will do, is go through that. So here is the solution. We asked ourselves why I have them, meaning my fear. Wasn't it because self-reliance failed us? Self-reliance was good as far as it went, but it didn't go far enough. Some of us once had I'll confess, I had dental work 2 weeks ago, and today, and I'm not holding a resentment. Thankfully, I'm not. I'm really not that upset. But somehow, the Novocaine shot, I still have kind of a numb tongue. And it was kind of a concern, but I thought, you know what, I'm putting this in God's hands. I called a couple of times to say, is there something I should do with this? So anyway, if I'm tongue-tied, it's partly that. It does feel like it's getting better. So we reviewed our fears thoroughly. We put them on paper, even though we had no resentment in connection with them. We asked ourselves why we had them. Wasn't it because self-reliance failed us? Self-reliance was good as far as it went, but it didn't go far enough. Some of us had once a great self-confidence, but it didn't fully solve the fear problem or any other. When it made us cocky, it was worse. Perhaps there is a better way. We think so. For now, we are now on a different basis, the basis of trusting and relying upon God. We trust infinite God rather than our finite selves. That's probably one of my more favorite sentences. We trust infinite God rather than finite selves. Okay. God's allowing whatever's going to happen in America to be, and does he need Eric Boland's little opinion to change someone else's mindset? The irony of that is, if I'm afraid of someone like the government trying to change all our minds and mind control, I'm part of the problem by trying to change someone else's mind. Either way, I'm exaggerating this a little bit for effect, because I was having what I thought was just an informative discussion. I didn't really even feel that guilty about much anything, because I didn't feel like I stepped over boundaries, but it was more like, consider this, consider that. But my motive aren't always pure. So how do I get that self-reflection? By praying and asking God to reveal to me. Self-reliance fails us. And there is a better way. We trust infinite, meaning infinite, all-powerful God rather than our finite selves. We are in the world to play the role he assigns, just to the extent that we do as we think he would have us, and humbly rely on him, does he enable us to match calamity with serenity. So I'm going to do something here. Oh, always. I go to this all the time, especially when I'm working online with people. So this link that I'm going to post here takes you to a PDF version of the Alcoholics Anonymous book. And so Aaron McDonald asked, how do you get AA book? But yeah, it's nice to have a hard copy. I usually pick them up for $4 or $5, and I usually just pick up extra because I know I'm going to be working with people that want them. It's really weird because I'm really into the Bible. I'm really into spiritual literature, but I will say that this book is really helpful, really helpful. And that's where I think there are really skilled 12-steppers that really didn't bat an eye too much with what went on. Because they're screening for, how am I being resentful here? They're not going to relapse during tough times. They're not going to relapse because they're not going to build up a resentment. Yeah, Aaron McDonald, you can get the AA book from the AA people, and that's probably good. I think it's usually about $14. Yeah, I wonder how fast shipping and all that is. It is online, and if people really want a good place to start, pages 58 to 88, especially pages 84 to 88. 84 to 88 are the daily things to do. And And pretend you don't. I mean, well, if you have an alcohol problem, then don't pretend you don't have one. But just pretend that you don't have any addiction at all. But these things do afflict you. Use it there. It says, we are in the world to play the role he assigns, meaning God, just to the extent that we do as we think he would have us and humbly rely on him. Does he enable us to match calamity with serenity? I love that phrase too. I can, when there's calamity, I can go and if I apply this like a salve, it works. If I apply it towards a salve to my soul. So our friend Jack, who's been pretty faithful here, asks, how do you nurture those family relationships from a distance? Good question. I received a letter from a friend that lives probably 10 miles down the street. And she was homeschooling and she taught her kids to write letters. And I thought, in the olden days, before we had internet communication like we're doing now, before I remember I'm old enough for long distance telephone. People had to shout through the phone. Before texting, how did we really communicate? And how did loved ones communicate during the war? It was through letter writing. So I think there's a lot that could be done with just letter writing. I don't have something now, but it's tangible. Remember, they would use perfume sometimes. Gosh, I could get choked up thinking about it. But imagine you're a soldier and you're waiting for that loved one's letter. And you might read it over and over again and comfort yourself with that. Now, by the way, I'm tearing up. I've never been a soldier. I've worked with soldiers. But it means the world to them. And so if we sent just loved ones letters, they may not get it, but it might actually be pretty special. And the reality is cards are pretty special, but it's hard to find a card that really expresses the sentiment. But I have a creative bent. I get it from my family, I get it from God, but I think we should use these things. So I've thought for other occasions, other problems, how do I, and this will be a conglomerate of things, like when kids would go to camp, we might send like 5 letters for them to open up. When I was gone on a trip, there may be 5 little sandwich bags for them to open up and get something at a distance. When I was in college, I would get a box, a care package. Again, we were homesick, 6 hours away, and it was fun to get cookies and things like that. In fact, there was an excitement of getting something in the mail. Sending books to people. I will be reading a book. Actually, this is totally off the subject, but it's really a cool book. If a person's a Christian interested in spiritual literature, it's called The Sunflower by Saint John of Tobolsk. Let's see if I'm... what is it on? On the... Well, first of all, it's a really good book. It is old, maybe 1500s, and written by someone else, but then revamped by St. John. And the sunflower always faces the sun. And so this is a metaphor for the Christian who's always facing God's will, always facing God's power, facing God's love. And I love this. This is a touching, even on a cloudy day, the sunflower is looking towards God, looking towards the sun. So this book is such a classic book on the will of God, and all our fears, all our problems really have a stemming from not really trusting in God's providence, not really trusting in God's will, that God has all this all planned out. And it's, I'm not describing it right because it's not like we have no interaction with it, but it's just a really good book. And I think it might be online because it's so old, and it might be under the heliotropium in Latin, but you might find it, but it's just easier. It's $20 about at St. Tikhon's Press. Well, it may be somewhere else, but it's on there. Reach out to me, but it's very, anyway, that book is like a comfort book that I would send to people. And I just, in fact, this is weird. I sent a bunch out earlier, but I just happened to send one today. Oh, and Aaron points out you can get it on Kindle too. So I had visited a new friend out in Bonners Ferry, Idaho. And I said, do you have this book? He says, no. And it's like, well, here, I'll send it to you. So popped it in the mail. Phone calls, obviously, is a good way to connect. Skype. And I don't really use Skype. I use GoToMeeting. I do worry about Zoom. I think FaceTime is good. What's fascinating is why do I not use that more often? Like I connected with a friend in Texas this morning, and I thought, well, why don't we just FaceTime each other? But it seemed just easier to use the phone. And I think he was comforted by the call. Along those lines, well, back to Zoom. Zoom has security problems, in my opinion. But if you look online, Forbes magazine, and the problems with Zoom, and I don't want to get into a controversy, there are a lot of people who, family members, that get really irate at me. And it's like, this is just my understanding of Zoom. I was using GoToMeeting, but Zoom had security issues, and in fact, the timeline is so long at the problems, one day after another, after another, after another, and when governments are not even using Zoom anymore. I mean, governments around the world. And I actually got hacked. I had a password I'd used for 30 years for a healthcare site. And after using Zoom, it's like, that's kind of creepy. And well, just say that it was given to me for free through the government. I decided, no, I'm not going to use this free version. And it's not just the issue with people coming into your room unannounced and doing bad stuff. It's actually mining data. And then you learn, and shall I say this? Well, some of it is, it does have connections with China. Here are the facts is, we had security issues with China before this all happened. The president pointed it out. He was being hard with China. Then we get a coronavirus. From where? China. Okay, then we go from 10 million subscribers to 300 million in 1 month. What are we using Zoom? Where is it? It has connections with China. In fact, on the Forbes website, it said, as you pay extra, we'll make sure your data doesn't go through China. It's like, I just know I'm not doing this. So that's the problem with Zoom. But guess what? As I speak, I'm taking a class that will be an eight-week training in something that's really near and dear to me about the mind-body connection and where is it located? Well, the teachers, one teacher's in Detroit and one's in Australia. It's really a funky class in that it's really cool about people that suffer chronic pain. And I've gotten training with one of the instructors before. I was all prepared to go. I was really excited about it. Then Corona hit, so I canceled that. Um, so guess what they're using is Zoom. So I'm thinking, and here's what I would do. I would pray about it, say, God, what do you want me to do here? I think I'm going to do some research because I'm not going to ask them to change their mode of communication. Um, but I think what I'll do is I'll get some iPad that doesn't have any personal anything on it and probably do it through there. There's probably a way to do that to minimize the risk. And yeah, and I feel bad because it's free. So many people use it. Who can afford another iPad? Well, I'm not going to buy another iPad, but I'm just going to try to narrow it down to get through these classes because it just is what it is. Back to comforting those at a distance. I think creativity really does help in times of darkness. I kind of am interested in art, almost went into art therapy. Well, I actually went into almost art, period, but I think it would be hard for me to make a living. But you're using different aspects of the brain when you're doing something creative. Like when my grandmother passed away, who was a very wonderful person. He was like my mother's mother. She was like over the top. If there was a grandmother to be had, it was her. And I don't want to go into all the wonderful things she did, but they lived on a ranch. She cooked food that resembled that. We'd go up into the mountains, into the streams. She was from Kansas, but wanted the finer things in life. So you saw the contrast there. She raised my mother through the Depression. I mean, just so when she passed away, I channeled my energy into a slideshow, which I guess slideshows were being popular, but no one in our family had done that. I had the ability to just create one, got the most perfect music. At the same time, I realized, my grandmother was into butterflies, so that then I thought, well, I have the slides. I'm just going to have the Costco make all the pictures. I grabbed boards and took tissue paper and kind of decoupaged tissue paper so that it made it look like really cool stuff. And then I thought, well, that's good enough. But then I had stamps. My wife was a stamper. And so we had this stamp where you could stamp something. Forgot how it worked, but it was pretty cool stuff where there were butterflies and there was glitter like embossing. And you took this little hair dryer and it bubbled up. So it made it look like relief and they were sparkly. And it was like really cool. Anyway, showed up at the funeral with these things. Well, maybe I did it I try not to do it for attention, but people it was a hit. It really helped channel their feelings into something spectacular. Did I feel better doing that? Yes. Would my grandmother have loved that? Yes. So I share that story to say that started me thinking, how do you comfort people? So you could take something very artistic, something unexpected, that would really help people feel better. And the loved ones that you're wanting to nurture. I recently thought it would be cool to send my mother, who's 84. Actually, it was my mother-in-law first. My mother-in-law, who had her birthday recently and didn't want to cook. And my father-in-law did try to cook. And she's more stay at home. And I thought, well, we could do, what is it called? something dash, not dine and dash. That's where you go in and you eat and then you run and steal the food. Um, what is it? Well, DoorDash, or the it's like oh, I'm just not thinking about it. But it's the idea that the food is delivered to their house. I might call them and say, dinner's on us. We can't be with you, but you have an enjoyable, fun post dinner. I think we may see more services like that, flowers delivered, balloons maybe delivered, things that are just out of the ordinary. Um, okay, DoorDash and oh, I'm not going to make my brain. It's similar to the car thing where it's not Lyft, but it's well, anyway, it carries the food to the door. And yeah, if you make something, I'm a knitter. I think I shared that last time. Knitting hats for people, sending them in the mail. Um, yeah, yeah, no, this is going to cause us to find creative ways to communicate love. And I think for me, and it's everybody has to do their own. There's a couple of things that have really come to conclusion. One is everybody's going to experience this world differently, whether there's a political bent or a fear around the coronavirus or the fear of the government or what's going on there. And what we need is love and tolerance, respect, building a bridge, using the principles here of not being fear-based, not being controlling, not being selfish. It's going to be okay. I mean, it's really going to be okay. If we come from a model of God's in control, God loves me, He has a will for me, it's going to be okay. And maybe my job isn't to try to straighten out the world, but more straighten out me by allowing God to do that in me. And so that will take away arguments. And then if I pray and say, God, what do you want me to do today? Like, how do you want me to nurture people? I'll get ideas of how to do that. Like we made a blanket from my mother-in-law, one of those big blankets you can knit with your hands. And I thought that was kind of fun. Oh, I guess my point is sometimes I think maybe taking the risk to do the distance, to go visit the person. But I understand the nature of the question is how do you do it at a distance? But I sometimes think because of this, if we have the opportunity, it might be worth the challenge to do that. But I'll pray more about that. That's a really good question. I think I'll conclude with this. It seems that if we are nurturing others and comforting others, we ourselves feel better. And I think there's codependency, which is an extreme form of give, 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 and more give. And some of it is really fear driven, trying to make people stop drinking, do this and that. But also, it's we get addicted to the chemical, the good feelings we have of giving, and there can be an imbalance. But setting that aside, just going through the day and trying to cheer people up. I'm looking at battery life. Um, yeah, you guys will be saved by the battery. I went to the post office, was wrestling, trying to get my mother's wheelchair footrest that accidentally got stuck in the car, and I'm trying to find a box. The postman, post office worker, was so nice. He was multitasking, helping a lady, and he says, "Sir, if you go there and we're trying to find a box, none of these boxes look like it was going to fit." I thought this is going to cost $27 to do this. Kept on working with that. He says, "No, try the other side." And then we got it so it's like an envelope. Don't fold it, but just make it like And then another lady, I'm wrestling with the tape. I remembered to bring the tape because they don't really offer tape. My tape gets so stuck that cellophane and they were trying to close up. Well, anyway, she brought me some tape. She helped taped it up. These people were like wonderful. I almost felt like crying, like maybe I'm tearful because there's just so much out there. And these people were like bringing they didn't have to do that. So then I thanked them. I said, sir, you didn't need to really help me. Your kindness is so appreciated. And this woman, and then she hands me the tape. She says, here, you have this tape. This is so neat. Now, that act of kindness made my day. I mean, it just made me feel better. And I think that that's where direction we could go to really nurture each other. Oh, by the way, I do like videos. Most people can make a video and you just upload it to YouTube and make it private so that only, and then you send that link and said, this is a special happy birthday message or a message from your father to tell you how much I love you. In fact, I could probably do that with family members at a distance. Yeah, my dad would we had a real troubled relationship at the beginning of our life. He was pretty alcoholic, pretty abusive, but he got better, stopped drinking. He would call me like 3 times a week for, I'll say, years, just to say he loved me. He says, this is the call to tell you how much I love you. And it's like, that's pretty cool. In fact, he's quite inspirational to me of how much a person can change, because I had found God as an 18-year-old and he was very anti-God at that point, kind of put me down for it. But then in the end, he kind of came full circle and he did pass away, believing in God and connecting with God to the best of his ability. But what's amazing is he would just call to say he loved me. That's all he wanted to say. And it wasn't just once, it was numerous times. And so that's a way to comfort. The other thing is my parents and my grandparents had a tradition where on your birthday, you sing happy birthday. And the way they did it is you don't announce who you are at 6 a.m. and they'll just start singing at you. And it's your birthday. So there's little traditions that help us get through hard times. Well, I'm down to 8%. It's a joy to see all of you guys here tonight. It's just really kind of cool to see this much interaction. The Sunflower, Aaron pointed out, you can get on Kindle. And really good book, I think. Maybe you could try reading it, but it goes through lots and lots of examples of how God's will was manifested in things that didn't look right. And that is so helpful because we can really get frightened by looking at the events. But if we go, wait a minute, this is no different than anything else in life, that God is not controlling, but he's in control of all things. So with that, I will let you have a good evening. I wish you well. I plan to be here next Tuesday and maybe in between. Take it easy, all you guys. I love you. Bye-bye.